Mom kicked me out of a family photo for being ugly. I never forgot. Years later, she saw my face on a billboard. And then, 14. It's a truly hideous age, isn't it? All gangly limbs, metalwork in your mouth, skin deciding to wage war on your face, and hormones making you feel everything with the intensity of 1,000 suns. And it was at the peak of my own personal age of awkward that my mother decided I was unfit for public consumption, or at least unfit for the permanent record of our family's perceived perfection. The setting wasn't even our own home, which somehow made it worse. It was my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary party, a huge affair at some slightly too grand country hotel ballroom. Acres of damask tablecloths, sweating cheese platters, distant relatives you vaguely recognized, and the cloying scent of wilting roses and cheap champagne. My mother naturally saw this not as a celebration of her parents' enduring marriage, but as a prime opportunity to document her branch of the family in its absolute best light. She'd practically strong-armed the hired event photographer into doing a special session just for us. Her, Dad, my older sister Chloe, the golden child, and me. Chloe, of course, looked perfect. She always did. 2 years older, she'd somehow skipped the awkward phase entirely, emerging at 16 fully formed, blonde, effortlessly stylish in that boringly conventional way my mother adored. She had the family look, the right shade of eyes, the approved hair texture, the easy smile that reached her eyes exactly when required. Me? I was a disaster area. I'd had a growth spurt that left me tripping over my own feet. My face was a constellation of angry red spots despite my best efforts, and my teeth were caged in brightly colored braces I hadn't yet learned to smile around without looking like a traumatized shark. To top it off, my hair, which wasn't the approved shade of blonde, was doing something particularly frizzy and uncooperative that day. I knew, even before she opened her mouth, that I was falling short of the required aesthetic standard. Mom fussed endlessly with the photographer, arranging us and rearranging us under the wilting floral archway they'd set up. Chloe, dear, stand a little closer to your father. Head up. Smile. Not too wide. Then her gaze landed on me, hovering uncertainly at the edge of the group. Her lips thinned into that familiar line of disapproval. She tilted her head, squinting as if examining a particularly unappealing insect. She murmured, loud enough for Dad, Chloe, and the increasingly uncomfortable photographer to hear. She explicitly gestured between me and my radiant sister. Chloe looks so lovely, doesn't she? Really captures the family resemblance. Then, turning back to me, her voice became crisp, matter-of-fact, like she was asking me to pass the salt. You know what, OP? You don't quite fit this picture, do you? It'll look so much better without you throwing off the balance. She didn't even flinch, didn't specify why, just the cold, absolute dismissal. Just step out, dear. Go stand over there for a minute while we get this done. The air went still. My dad, bless his spineless heart, started a feeble protest. Oh, come on. Mom's name, she's fine. Let OP just... But Mom cut him off with a glare so sharp it could have sliced bread. He subsided instantly, staring fixedly at his shoes. Chloe, my perfect sister, didn't even look at me. She just smoothly shifted slightly, letting Mom pull her forward into the space where I had been standing, closing the gap, erasing me before I'd even fully stepped away. I caught the eye of my slightly kinder, older cousin standing nearby, watching the whole exchange with wide, horrified eyes, but she looked away quickly, intimidated. The photographer cleared his throat, looking anywhere but at me, fiddling with his camera settings. Heat flooded my face. My ears roared. Humiliation, thick and suffocating, pressed down on me. I backed away, stumbling slightly, fetching up against the flocked wallpaper by the entrance to the ballroom. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, relatives, waiters, strangers, witnessing my rejection. I wrapped my arms around myself, digging my fingernails into my elbows, focusing every ounce of my being on the impossible task of not crying, not here, not in front of them, not giving her the satisfaction. From my lonely post on the sidelines, I watched them. My family, Mom beaming proprietorially, Dad managing a weak smile, Chloe looking serene and beautiful. The photographer raised his camera. Okay, big smiles, everyone. Flash. The moment was captured, the perfect family portrait. Without me, I had been officially disappeared. That photo, naturally, ended up framed in pride of place on my mother's meticulously curated mantelpiece, a constant gleaming reminder. When people asked why I wasn't in it, she had a rotating repertoire of excuses. Oh, OP was feeling poorly that day. She was off playing with her cousins somewhere. Or her favorite, delivered with a sigh. You know, teenagers so moody she refused to cooperate. Never the truth. Never. I kicked her out because she wasn't pretty enough. The wound from that day didn't scab over. It festered. It became the background radiation of my adolescence, confirming my deepest fear that I was fundamentally wrong, unworthy, mismatched not just for a photo, but for the family itself. Mom, sensing my withdrawal, offered no comfort, only justifications disguised as wisdom. Honestly, OP, looking back, you would have ruined that lovely photo. I did you a favor, really. You wouldn't want people seeing you in that awkward phase forever, would you? The cruelty was breathtaking. I retreated into myself, but the hurt needed somewhere to go. It curdled into a strange, cold energy. I started exercising obsessively, punishingly almost, running until my lungs burned, taking up kickboxing, pouring all the frantic, helpless anger into physical exertion. If I couldn't control how I looked, maybe I could control my body, make it strong, make it obey. At the same time, a morbid fascination took root. I started devouring fashion magazines, not the teen ones, but Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, W. I dissected runway shows online, studied designers, models, photographers. Initially, it was about trying to understand Mom's warped obsession with image, the currency she dealt in. What made someone match? What gave an image power? Then, slowly, insidiously, a different thought began to form. What if this world, this seemingly superficial universe of aesthetics, could be weaponized? The epiphany came late one night, scrolling through grainy footage of an Alexander McQueen show. The models weren't conventionally pretty. They were strange, angular, fierce, otherworldly. They didn't match anything except the designer's radical vision. And they were captivating, powerful, unforgettable. A switch flipped in my brain. This world didn't just value perfection. It valued impact. It valued being different, if you owned it. Maybe the very things that made me mismatch my family could be assets here. Maybe this was the way out, the way up, the way to prove her wrong, on her own terms. The decision wasn't loud. It settled deep in my bones. I would conquer the world that judged me, using the very tools of image and appearance she worshipped. Putting the dream into action was, frankly, a brutal shit show. My grades weren't stellar, and my hesitant applications to local colleges with fashion programs were met with polite but firm rejections. Apparently, sketching angsty figures in notebooks didn't count as a portfolio. My attempts to get noticed by local agencies were even more demoralizing. I scraped together money from a weekend job at a bakery, smelling perpetually of yeast and burnt sugar, to attend a couple of open calls. The waiting rooms were filled with girls who looked like Chloe, effortlessly beautiful, radiating confidence. I felt like a badly wrapped parcel. The feedback was swift and cutting, too commercial awkward. Not really the look we're going for. Maybe try again when your skin clears up? Each rejection felt like Mom's voice echoing in those sterile offices. My old body image demons, roused by the photo incident, came roaring back with a vengeance in this new environment. Suddenly, my body wasn't just awkward. It was measurements on a chart. Constantly scrutinized, judged too tall, too short, too wide, too thin. It was exhausting. Desperate for pictures, any pictures, I answered an online ad from a photographer offering free test shoots for new faces. He had a cheap studio set up in his garage, smelled faintly of desperation, and the photos he produced were badly lit, slightly creepy, and utterly useless. He tried to convince me his artistic shots would get me noticed. They wouldn't have gotten me noticed for a bus pass. Another dead end, another chunk of hope chipped away. I confided my vague fashion industry interest to my family once. Huge mistake. Dad looked uncomfortable. Chloe smirked. Mom scoffed openly. Modeling? OP, darling. Be realistic. It's a lovely dream for some girls, but, well, maybe focus on your studies? The condescension was thick enough to spread on toast. After that, I shut up about it. The grind was relentless. I picked up another job, waitressing evenings at a soulless chain restaurant, adding stale grease and despair to my bakery aroma profile. I tried taking a night class in pattern cutting, falling asleep over the sewing machine. Every penny saved felt like a victory, every rejection a confirmation of Mom's verdict. There were days I nearly gave up, nearly called home, nearly crawled back into the mismatched box they'd put me in. But the memory of her face, her dismissive words by that floral archway, kept me going. Anger is a powerful fuel. Then came a sliver of light in the most unexpected place. I was working a truly dire catering gig for some local boutique open, balancing trays of lukewarm mini quiches and dodging air kisses. Backstage, amidst the chaos of discarded hangers and frantic stylists, I almost collided with a makeup artist packing up her kit. She looked about 50, face like a roadmap of late nights and seen-it-all cynicism, but her eyes were sharp. She took one look at my waitress uniform, my tired face, the way I was covertly observing the models, and seemed to read my entire pathetic story. Maybe she was bored. Maybe she saw a flicker of her younger self. Whatever it was, she stopped packing, lit a cigarette, right there, indoors, because she clearly gave zero fucks, and looked me up and down. Not judgmentally, like Mom, but professionally. You trying to break in? She asked, smoke curling around her words. I nodded dumbly. She took another drag. Tough business. You got the height, maybe. Weird face, but weird can work if you sell it. Stop slouching. And for God's sake, sort out that skin. She scribbled a name and number on a napkin. This guy, she said, tapping the napkin, runs Spectrum. Tiny agency, mostly weirdos. Might take a look. Don't tell him I sent you unless he asks. And kid? She met my eyes. Develop a thicker skin, thicker than rhino hide. You'll need it. Then she snapped her kit shut and was gone. That crumpled napkin felt like a winning lottery ticket. Spectrum agency. Weirdos. It took me 3 weeks to work up the courage to call. The guy on the phone sounded bored but told me to email snapshots. Not garage creeper snapshots. Proper ones. I used my meager savings to get simple, clean headshots done by a student photographer. I emailed them off, heart pounding, expecting nothing. A week later, an email back. Come in Tuesday, 3 p.m. Spectrum was housed in a dusty office above a kebab shop. The agent, Mick, looked like he'd slept in his clothes, but his eyes were as sharp as the makeup artist's. He barely looked at my photos. He just walked around me, squinted, muttered something about good bones, and offered me representation. Non-exclusive, no guarantees, standard commission. My look was niche, he warned. But maybe, just maybe, some indie designer might bite. It wasn't Vogue, but it was something. A crack of daylight. Mick started sending me to castings. Mostly unpaid student shows or low-budget editorials for obscure zines, but one clicked. A young, fiercely independent local designer known for angular, slightly goth-inspired clothes was looking for models for her upcoming show, part of a small, off-schedule Fashion Week event. She liked my weird face. She liked my walk, honed by miles of waitressing and fueled by nervous energy. The show itself was chaos. Backstage was cramped, clothes were flying, hairspray fogged the air. But when I stepped onto that makeshift runway under the hot lights, with the bass thumping through the floor, something shifted. For those 30 seconds, walking in those strange, beautiful clothes, I wasn't the awkward girl. I wasn't the mismatched daughter. I was just there, present, visible. And for the first time, maybe, just maybe, that felt okay. Someone even took a decent photo. A photo I was in. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A tiny piece of validation in a world that had seemed determined to offer none. I used the photo from that show, blurry as it was, to update my non-existent portfolio. Mick sent me out more. The hustle intensified. More tiny shows, more test shoots that went nowhere, all while juggling the bakery and the restaurant, the exhaustion, the constant gnawing insecurity. Progress felt glacial. Just when I landed a slightly bigger local lookbook shoot, paid even, disaster struck. My ancient car, my lifeline for getting to castings outside the unreliable bus routes, finally gave up the ghost. The repair costs were astronomical, way beyond my savings. Rent loomed. Panic set in. I was working 30 hours a week on top of trying to build this fragile career, and it still wasn't enough. The thought of having to ask my parents for money, especially now, was nauseating. The dream felt like it was slipping through my fingers. Failure felt imminent. Giving up and crawling home felt terrifyingly close. During this period, contact with my family was minimal, strained. Very low contact. Occasional duty calls, birthdays, holidays. I kept my struggles entirely to myself. When asked what I was doing, I mumbled about working in retail and exploring some creative projects. They didn't push. I think, honestly, they preferred not knowing the details. My silly modeling thing, as Mom invariably called it whenever it accidentally came up, was just an embarrassing phase I was hopefully growing out of. Their low expectations were paradoxically both insulting and a shield. They couldn't be disappointed in something they never believed in anyway. I scraped through the financial crisis by picking up extra shifts, eating instant noodles, and getting a small, reluctant loan from my sympathetic cousin, the one who'd looked horrified at the wedding. It was grim, but quitting? Not an option. Every dismissal, every financial hurdle, every memory of Mom's face just hardened my resolve. And then, after nearly 2 years of relentless grind, something shifted. Through Mick, I got sent to a casting call. Not for some indie zine, but for a major cosmetics brand known for its slightly edgy, high-fashion campaigns. It felt like a different league. The waiting room was intimidating, filled with agency-represented pros. I nearly walked out, but the makeup artist's voice echoed in my head. Thicker skin. I went in, did my walk, tried to project confidence I didn't feel. Weeks passed, nothing. I chalked it up to another rejection, started looking for a third job. Then, an email from Mick. Subject, URGENT, offer. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open it. It wasn't just for a campaign, it was the campaign. And not just that. They were offering me a multi-year contract, a spokesperson deal, for a significant amount of money. Life-changing money. Apparently, the brand director had seen my weird face in the casting tape and decided I was exactly the unconventional but aspirational look they wanted for their new global launch. I stared at the email, reading and rereading it. Disbelief warred with a dizzying surge of triumph. It wasn't just validation, it was vindication on a scale I hadn't dared to imagine. Stability, respect, a platform, money, my own money. Enough money to never, ever have to rely on my family again. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. The power dynamic had just irrevocably shifted. The game had changed. And suddenly, ignoring Mom's past cruelty didn't seem quite sufficient anymore. An idea, sharp and glittering like shattered glass, began to form in the back of my mind. Payback, served cold, on a very public platter. Edit 1. For clarity, Mom's exact words when she kicked me out of the photo were, "You just don't fit this picture, do you? Chloe looks so much more like us. It'll look better without you throwing off the balance. Just step out." And yes, Chloe, basking in the golden glow, didn't even look back as Mom pulled her into my spot. That silence from her hurt almost as much as Mom's words. The contract signing felt less like a champagne-popping celebration and more like locking the final deadbolt on a door I'd been trying to escape through for years. Stability, security, independence, won on my own terms. In the very arena, image, appearance, value, where I had been judged so harshly and found wanting. The irony was sharp, metallic, satisfying. The first campaign launched a few months later. High-gloss magazine spreads, online banners, and the pièce de résistance. Massive posters and digital displays in flagship stores across the country. My face, my weird face, 15 feet high, staring out coolly from behind luxury cosmetics. Unavoidable. It didn't take long. Maybe 2 weeks after the campaign blanketed the major cities, the inevitable happened. I heard about it later from my cousin, the one who'd looked horrified at the wedding. Apparently, Mom had been on one of her marathon shopping trips at a high-end mall, probably scouting things she couldn't quite afford but felt entitled to own. She'd rounded a corner in the cosmetics hall and come face to face with me, a giant, airbrushed, impossibly chic version of the daughter she'd banished from the family photo. My cousin reported, with ill-concealed glee, that Mom had literally staggered back, dropping several shopping bags, causing a minor scene. Disbelief, followed by a choked, sputtering sound, then a rapid recovery, as she apparently announced loudly to a nearby sales assistant, "That's my daughter, you know." The digital dam broke shortly thereafter. My phone, previously blessedly quiet on the familial front, began buzzing with notifications. Texts from her, voicemails, a sudden deluge after years of near silence. The gist was predictable. Performative pride, exclamation points scattered like confetti, breathless claims of always knowing I had it in me, suggestions we must celebrate immediately. All interwoven with a complete stunning amnesia regarding the years of dismissal, the photo incident, the general lack of support. It was textbook narcissistic hoovering, latching onto the success now that it reflected well on her. Then, after a few days of my polite but distant non-responses, the angle shifted subtly. Hints about her own financial tightness, casual mentions of investments I should consider making, veiled suggestions that successful children really ought to give back to the parents who sacrificed so much. The mask of maternal pride slipped, revealing the grasping opportunism underneath. I read the messages, listened to the voicemails with a kind of detached coldness. The old hurt was there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but it was drowned out by contempt. She hadn't changed. She hadn't reflected. She hadn't apologized. She just saw a shiny new object, my success, my income, and wanted to possess it, to attach herself to it. The 14-year-old me might have craved this attention, this sudden pride, however fake. But the me who had clawed her way here knew better. Ignoring her wasn't enough anymore. The public humiliation she'd inflicted demanded a public response. The scales needed balancing. An idea, cold and sharp, began to take shape. Revenge, served on the flawless, airbrushed platter of the industry she revered. I started planning. It had to be symbolic. It had to invert the original dynamic. She'd excluded me from the picture because I didn't match. Fine. I would create a picture, a literal photoshoot, celebrating the beauty of not matching, of imperfection, of authenticity, and she would be the one excluded, publicly. I ran the concept past my agent, framing it as a personal artistic project I wanted to fund, leveraging my new contract's clout. I spoke to the makeup artist who'd given me my first break, now a trusted friend and collaborator. Her cynical eyes lit up with understanding. "Oh, honey," she drawled, "let's give Mommy Dearest her close-up." We secured a top photographer known for edgy, interesting portraits, booked a high-end studio, and assembled a cast. Diverse models I admired, friends from my found family, people who represented genuine connection and unconventional beauty. The theme, perfectly imperfect. Getting Mom there required careful stage management. A direct invitation was too suspicious. Instead, I let details leak strategically. Mentioned this every special, deeply personal photo shoot celebrating family and resilience during a rare brief phone call with my GC sister Chloe, knowing the information would get back. I dropped hints to my sympathetic cousin, aware the family grapevine was ruthlessly efficient. Predictably, within days, feelers came back via flying monkey relatives. Mom had heard about my lovely project and was so touched and would love to come support me on the day, exactly as planned. Her entitlement and desperate need to be associated with my success were the hooks. I gave vague, non-committal permission via a third party. If she wants to stop by briefly, I suppose that's fine. The day of the shoot arrived. The studio buzzed with professional energy. Lights, cameras, racks of carefully chosen clothes, the murmur of stylists and assistants. My chosen family and the diverse models looked incredible, comfortable, laughing between shots. The atmosphere was creative, supportive, genuine. I felt centered, calm, a cold resolve settling in my stomach. Then she arrived, an hour late, of course, making an entrance. Mom swept in, dressed slightly too flamboyantly, smelling strongly of expensive perfume, eyes darting around, assessing, already trying to hold court. She air-kissed me effusively, ignoring my stiffness, then immediately started telling the photographer how to do his job, and complimenting the models in ways that felt subtly insulting. She clearly expected this to be, at least partly, about her, the proud mother of the rising star. We worked through various setups, individual portraits, small group shots. The energy remained positive, focused. I waited. Then, the photographer called for the final setup, a large group portrait meant to capture the essence of the perfectly imperfect theme. Everyone gathered: the models, my friends, my allies. A tableau of unique individuals, united in their difference, radiating confidence. As the photographer arranged the shot, Mom pushed forward expectantly, fluffing her hair, positioning herself near me, ready for her presumed place in the frame. This was it. I held up a hand, signaling the photographer to wait. The studio fell quiet. All eyes turned to me. I looked directly at Mom. Her expectant smile faltered slightly under my cool gaze. "Mom," I began, my voice steady, carrying clearly across the large space. "What are you doing?" Confusion flickered across her face. "Darling, I'm getting in the photo for your lovely family project." I let the silence hang for a beat. "Actually," I continued, my voice devoid of warmth, "this shoot is about authenticity, about celebrating genuine connection, about embracing what makes us unique." I let my eyes travel over her, deliberately mimicking her critical assessment of me all those years ago. "And honestly," a small, cold smile touched my lips, "your whole vibe just doesn't match the aesthetic we're going for today. It's distracting." I paused, letting the words sink in, enjoying the dawning horror in her eyes. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." I nodded almost imperceptibly to the large, impassive studio security guard I'd hired specifically for this moment, who had been hovering discreetly near the entrance. "The pictures," I added, twisting the knife with her own words, "will be better without you throwing off the balance." The color drained from her face, shock, disbelief. Then, the predictable explosion. Narcissistic rage, detonated under the hot studio lights. A strangled gasp, then the screaming started. "How dare you! After everything I've done, I am your mother, you ungrateful little bitch! You wouldn't be here without me!" She lunged towards me, face contorted, but the security guard smoothly intercepted her. She struggled against his calm, firm grip, shrieking accusations, threats, incoherent babble about disrespect and betrayal. Models exchanged wide-eyed looks. My friends stood silent, witnessing the meltdown they'd heard so much about. The photographer, perhaps accidentally on purpose, caught a few frames of the undignified struggle as she was firmly, relentlessly escorted out of the studio, her furious shouts echoing back down the corridor before the heavy door finally shut, leaving blessed silence in its wake. In the sudden quiet, I took a deep breath. My hands were trembling slightly, but a profound sense of release washed over me. Catharsis. The 14-year-old girl, crying silently on the sidelines, finally felt avenged. I met the makeup artist's eye across the room. She gave me a slow, deliberate wink. I turned back to the photographer, my voice clear. "Okay, let's get this shot." The immediate aftermath was quiet, eerily so. The crew, true professionals, got back to work. My friends offered silent, strong support. The incident became hushed industry gossip. The model who publicly ejected her own mother from a photo shoot. But from my family, nothing. Complete radio silence. No furious calls from Dad. No tearful messages from Chloe. No contact from aunts, uncles, cousins. It was as if a cone of silence had descended, leaving me unsure if they were horrified, terrified of Mom's wrath, or simply cutting me off entirely. The silence felt heavier, more definitive than any argument could have. Mom, predictably, did not go quietly into the night. Her extinction burst was loud and messy. A smear campaign commenced online, vague but pointed posts about disrespectful children and parental heartbreak. Calls were made to distant relatives, painting me as a monster. I heard rumors she'd even tried complaining to my agency and the brand I was contracted with, attempting to sabotage my career. It was futile. They were briefed, loyal, and cared more about results than family drama. I blocked her number, blocked her sparse social media attempts, documented everything just in case, and refused to engage. Let her scream into the void. Months turned into years. My career solidified. The perfectly imperfect photo series, when released, garnered significant attention for its message and artistry. I used my platform, cautiously at first, then more boldly, to talk about unconventional beauty, about finding strength in difference, about building families based on choice and respect, not just obligation. I remained NC with Mom. The radio silence from Dad and Chloe eventually fractured into occasional, awkward, heavily boundaries contact. They never mentioned the incident. We tacitly agreed to pretend large swathes of our shared history didn't exist. It was functional, distant. I accepted it. My real family were the friends who stood beside me, the allies who believed in me, the partner I eventually met who loved my weird face and celebrated my strength. And Mom, she's still out there, on the sidelines. I hear about her sometimes, still living in the same place, still obsessed with appearances, still complaining about her ungrateful daughter. Occasionally, a well-meaning relative will forward a clipping about my latest campaign or mention she saw me in a magazine. So, yes, now she watches me. She watches the life I built, the success I achieved, the image I control. She watches from the permanent distance I enforce, forever outside the frame. There's no satisfaction in her watching. Not anymore. Only a quiet, settled peace in knowing she has no power here. The picture is mine now. Entirely mine. Edit 2. Some people asked if the public revenge was worth the family silence. Fallout. For me, yes. The original humiliation was public. Her attempts to ride my coattails were public. My response needed to be equally clear. It wasn't just about hurting her. It was about reclaiming my narrative in the most undeniable way possible. The family's silence hurts, in a way. But it also confirmed whose side they were truly on. Knowing that clearly is its own kind of freedom. That's all for this story. I'll be back with another one. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It motivates me to create more content like this.